We've got a wonderful array of panelists here who do international work in different ways, and they got there in a variety of paths. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. If you haven't signed in, I'm hoping that you could sign in on this sheet. I'll put it up here. Also, Law Career Services has, it looks like a lot of you have taken this already, but this is a nice sheet that gives alumni who do international law publications and different scholarships and professors who've done international on a variety of things. So this is really helpful if you want to pick one up. And welcome, and we've got lunch. We just got plates, so now as I guess people are talking, if you can gracefully come and get some lunch while you're listening. We will get started, and Neil Smith is going to do the introductions and moderate for us.
After this program, we're not going to use the podium and microphone, but I think we'll speak loud enough to be able to hear us. I don't think this program needs a great deal of moderation. It's not a substantive law presentation. It's a program on how people get into careers that deal with international law. It's a very eclectic field. Some people are born in foreign countries and sort of, are born into it, but most of us sort of gravitate into that by choice and sometimes by happenstance. So we're going to each tell our story as to where we are and how we got there, and make some suggestions that if you have an interest in this area. I know the economies are tight, people are looking for different things, but often there are opportunities in areas like this that you don't necessarily think about, and you can do work in the area, or volunteer to do something, and sometimes people volunteer to do things that no one else wants to do and end up with a career choice as a result of that. So I'll start off since I'm here. I'm an attorney with Robert Majeski. I do intellectual property. I was with a boutique firm. A lot of those firms disappeared over time. Now I'm with a general firm that does mostly litigation. I do international law in many different places in intellectual property, but I don't really think of myself as an international lawyer. We just have the opportunity to do licensing, you do lawsuits, you do inbound, outbound, anti-counterfeiting, enforcement, cross-border things, and you end up getting there. Other people have sort of different choices. I'll put in a plug for the two sponsoring organizations. The American Bar Association has an international law section. They have student membership and reduced rates to participate in this. The State Bar of California has free membership for law students to participate, and membership in the section. So you can do that without being a lawyer. ABA may as well, probably does as well. If you have an interest in the area, you can join the section. You get newsletters, you get information. These days there's a lot of information available on both their websites where they have programs and reduced rate attendance and materials. So I'm going to let each person sort of introduce themselves, say what they are and how they got here, and I think at the end we'll probably take questions because we have a lot of people that sort of have some stories to tell, and we'll take questions at the end unless it's particularly pertinent. We'll do that.
Sure. Thanks, Tom. And thank you. It's really an honor to be here at Golden Gate University Law School. It's always dangerous to ask lawyers to talk about themselves because, narcissism runs rampant, but I'll try to be brief so hopefully we can have a lot of interaction in the session. I'm a partner at DLA Piper. We are a large law firm. We're the world's largest law firm by number of attorneys. I head the Global Equity Group, and what we try to do is really help U.S. multinationals either expand into new markets overseas or more effectively navigate legal and strategic issues where they currently are. So we do a pretty good mix of everything from starting up a new venture in the country, what kind of entity, what are the tax issues, what are foreign exchange issues. So a pretty good mix. How did I get into international law? I probably, like many of you, I had sort of been bitten by the sort of allure and excitement of wanting to go overseas and do different things. And I had done overseas study during college, and actually took an opportunity during law school to take some time off, travel, explore. I did an internship overseas, came back to law school, finished up, landed my job in Silicon Valley. Everything was supposed to go exactly as it should, and everything immediately went wrong. So the economy tanked. I found the job in Silicon Valley wasn't all that interesting, and I started to think, wow, maybe this is a liberating chance to try and do something different. And then when I spoke to attorneys, a number of attorneys, about my idea that maybe I would go back, I'd spend time in Korea and China, maybe I'd try to find some kind of job out there. Almost to a person, they told me, this is not going to be good for your career. So I knew immediately it was the right thing to do. So I went and I spent time at a Korean law firm. I thought I would spend maybe a year or two, and ended up being 4. It was an incredible experience. It changed my life in every way. The work was really interesting. It was a wider range of work, from dealing with major restaurant retailers, all their employment issues, to pharmaceutical companies that wanted to deal with IP enforcement issues, to helping a car manufacturer set up in Korea. So it was a really great experience. I was then able to take that expertise and transfer back here to the U.S. and land a job with the law firm. Found the work much more interesting, and then transferred to yet another law firm, and here I am today. I think we'll get into, I know there's a danger in trying to generalize your own experiences, and we all want to think that we have the path and the solution, but maybe we'll touch on some of the themes today. I would simply say that what is accepted today and what I think is forward-looking today in a legal career is a lot different than it was 20, 15, 10, maybe even 5 years ago. U.S. companies are getting an increasing share, if not a majority, of their revenues and profits overseas. Commerce is increasingly global. Don't be afraid to develop new skills, develop expertise. If you have a chance to travel, to study, if you happen to have a language skill, develop those things. Those are strategic assets. Don't listen to lawyers or anyone who tells you have to go down a traditional path. I think we're obviously a very conservative group as lawyers, and we see the one path of least resistance. It's not the majority path. It's not the only path. It's probably not even the most successful path. So develop your interests. Neil had plugged the ABA and the California International Law section. Great opportunities to publish articles, develop expertise, come to our meetings, network. Networking is a pride-swallowing, painful experience, but it's not just about landing your first plum job. It really is a skill that you develop throughout your career. Keep meeting people, stay in touch with them, and I think it's a skill that will carry with you whether you do international or any kind of law. It just can't be emphasized enough. And just be passionate about what you do, because it comes through and it resonates with you.
Good morning, my name is Yu-Kyung, and I'm from Korea. I think compared to other panelists today, I have a different experience because I'm not practicing international law, but I have studied international law and constitutional law. So I want to share about more academic-based experience, and especially as a foreign student. I got my BA in law from Korea, and after that I just wanted to study about not only among people but among nations law. So that's why I started studying, especially public international law in Korea. But it's a bit different from here, so we have to take 2 more years coursework and 1 more year for thesis writing. So it took some time for me to finish those academic training. Then I was lucky to join in the Ministry of Justice Human Rights Department to draft the National Action Plan, which provides national guidelines for governmental branches in protecting human rights based on international covenants and further academic careers. So I'm in the Center for the Study of Law and Society at Berkeley Law School. Actually, during the last couple of years, I went back and forth international law, international human rights law, and constitutional law and law and society fields of work. And currently, I'm serving as an advisor of the international law section for the California Law Association. I don't know how many of you are interested in studying and becoming a legal scholar, but compared to practicing law, it takes a longer time, I would say, but it's quite fascinating field of experience for sure. And in my case, I try to publish a paper or article and join a lot of conferences. For example, Law Society annual meeting is held every year, and there is international law panels too. So many legal scholars worldwide join every year, so you can network with them and you can share your ideas and you can learn a lot from them. And during my master years, I also attended Hague Academy of International Law held in Netherlands. It's a very well-known summer courses at Hague Academy, which takes place for 6 weeks, 3 weeks for public international law and 3 other weeks for private international law. You can join just only one section or both. And worldly famous professors and practitioners in international law are invited to give intensive lectures there. And you can get access to Peace Palace Library, so it's a very fascinating experience. I would strongly recommend to find those things outside the US. And as an actually Korean student who studied international law, it was a bit difficult to find internship in an international organization, but I think you you can take advantage from your country. It's more, there are a lot of opportunities here, and you can apply for many other international organizations or non-governmental entities or even your U.S. governmental branches to work with them. Okay. So yeah, that's for now.
Yeah, my name is Jesko Onken. I'm here today. Well, I really appreciate to be here today and have the opportunity to share my experience a little bit with you. I want to tell you a little bit how international law can be practiced on a very small level. In fact, in a one-person law office. I opened my own law office 5 years ago here in San Francisco. In case you're wondering, there's a slight accent, so I am German. I also got all my legal education in Germany. But came here and opened a law practice. And I'm exclusively and only focusing on international transactions. It is quite an extraordinary path. I don't think I know anyone else who does it, even in US-wide, to the extent I service small and medium-sized companies. So it was kind of a leap of faith whether this is going to really work, and I got into international law. Way back, I always had an international interest. During law school in Germany, I actually also took a semester off. Went to Australia, did an internship. I don't think I can really, claim that I did a lot of law-related work there, but it was quite a life experience, and it carries with you. And if you have the opportunity to do anything like that and experience another country, it's really worth it, in my opinion. But maybe 5 years ago, I picked a business name, and we as Germans, we like long words like Fahrvergnügen and so on. So I picked a business name that's, long. maybe a little too long, but international legal management basically stands for a concept that I wanted to implement, and it is a concept for small and medium-sized companies that want to operate internationally. And this concept would allow them to really solve all their legal issues on an international basis. Maybe a descriptive name is not ideal if you really have to explain it, but I feel compelled that I have to because it's, the name itself is not, doesn't reveal a whole lot. So international legal management, to explain it, I want to go back a few years. I worked with an investment bank in Europe in 2005 and 2006. And I was in part of the legal department for the investment bank that dealt with issuing capital market securities and bonds and so on. So just to give you a quick overview, and that was really my first pure international transaction exposure. We would have an issuer, usually a corporate entity, that instead of getting a loan from a bank would go to the banks and say, hey, we want to issue a capital market instrument. So the bank would get other banks involved, so there would usually be 5 to 10 banks involved in issuing such a security, and then they would sell it on, or they would buy it from the issuer and sell it on to all their institutional investors. So you have a lot of players involved in such a transaction. One, the issuer itself, of course, they want to cover all the legal bases. Then all the banks have their interests, and the banks are located in various parts of the world. So typically, some in Europe, but they also want exposure in other markets. So we have usually an Asian bank, maybe a US bank in there as well. And all of them have their own laws to deal with, and their own interests. So it basically needs to, or what the investment bank did, they installed one center person, and they called it a transaction manager. And that was actually my role with the bank. So we would collect all the information, all the legal needs from all the players involved, and collect them and implement them into the legal documents required underlying the transaction. So this, and you can imagine there are other institutions involved, regulations. The SEC wants certain requirements. Other institutions like the BaFin in Germany wants other requirements implemented. So all these aspects need to come together, and this is the beauty of an international transaction. They all need to come together, and then they need to flow into one single document that describes the transaction. And this really, was a fun 2 years that I spent there. I learned a lot, and I thought, well, international transactions or corporations who want to expand abroad or have cross-border transactions have actually a very similar problem or a very similar scenario, and there must be a way to deal with it. And also on a smaller level, I know there are great large law firms out here like DLA Piper that can service the big corporations, but small and medium-sized companies without a known legal department, sometimes not having the appropriate funds to pay you guys, there must be a solution out there for them as well. And that's kind of what I offer. I offer my clients, I'm the only point of contact for all the legal questions. I then work with local attorneys in various other countries, define their scope of work. They bring in the answer that is needed for that particular country. I present it to the client, and we form together, with the client and myself, the end product for the client. And it's so far a nice success story. I've been in business for 5 years now. I have a constant growth of usually 30 to 50% each year in revenue. And it's a fun experience. I'm exposed to so many aspects of legal issues all throughout the world. It's one path that you can choose. Of course, it's a risky path. You need to, as a sole proprietor or in a small organization, you not only have to have legal skills, you need to be able to, sell in a way. You need to be a salesperson, if you like. But on the other hand, you also need to develop trust. And we all know pushy salespersons, and we don't like them. At least I don't. but it's a very fine line to really bring all these skills together. So if you want to choose a path that's kind of on a smaller scale, you need some kind of entrepreneurial sense or business sense, that would at least help you a little bit. And I hope I have a little bit of that so that, you know, my story can go on. Thank you.
Well, I'm Jan Nussbaum. Most of you know me here as working in law career services, but ways prior, I used to do international work. I practiced for 16 years, and a dozen of those years was doing international work. And so I actually want to go back a little bit. I promise I won't take too much time. But as an undergrad, I was an anthropology major and was very interested in different cultures, and lived in Mexico for a while. Was fairly proficient in Spanish. Also studied Asia, the history and culture of Asia. And my family used to give me a bad time. They said, "Jules, you're never going to find a job. You've got this liberal arts background. You'll never use it." But I found it interesting, and I like working with people from different places. So I went to law school a few years after I graduated, and found that I really liked in-house work, that I liked doing contracts and business transactions, and was working for a company while I was in law school, so that's where I kind of found that that's what I wanted to do. And so I got out of law school, worked for a couple years at a firm, doing both corporate transactional work and litigation, thinking that, you know, maybe my family was right, I'll never actually be using my anthropology degree. Well, after being at the firm for 2 years, I had my first daughter, and I was home on maternity leave, and I got this call from a friend that there was this position at Dole Packaged Foods, and would I want to take it? It was part-time, and I'd be doing a variety of things, but some of it was international. I was like, that sounds great. Okay, I'm on board. And so I went to work there for about 9 months, and was doing the international work was not glamorous. Well, a lot of it isn't glamorous, but I was basically sort of helping them set up certain subsidiaries and dissolving certain subsidiaries. It was very much just sort of paper pushing and things. Well, while I was doing it, we had this conflict with one of the, I can't remember now even if they were a distributor or a joint venture partner or somebody, but there was a conflict in the Philippines, and I had to handle it, and I had to hire outside counsel, and I had to do the whole thing. So that was sort of my first experience with doing international work. And from being at Dole, I then went to work. I got a permanent job working for a high-tech company down in San Jose, and mostly just doing contract work and that kind of thing. And then at one point, they had operations in Canada, and the general counsel said, you know, who wants to handle this transaction in Canada? And I was like, I'll do it. You know, I was very enthusiastic. Nobody else wanted to do it. And so I was working on selling our services business in Canada. So then I was going to leave that high-tech firm, wasn't doing well, and I called back to networking. Dean was talking about networking. I was commuting from Oakland to San Jose, and thought, what companies were close by? This company's not doing well. I'm sick of this commute. And Clorox was very near my house, and so I knew that one of the attorneys at Clorox was the president of the local association of in-house lawyers, and I called him up, and he said, do you have any international experience? And I said, well, I do. Here's what I have. You know, I have a little bit at Dole, and I have this work that I've been doing on this selling this services business in Canada. And he's like, great, that, you know, we really want to talk to you, because they wanted a junior lawyer. So I went in and found myself doing international work, and it was fantastic. And the first thing, I was sort of thrown in the deep end, and they had just bought a huge business, and they hadn't really figured out what they were going to do with the international businesses. So I was sent off on a couple-week trip to Australia to sell a brand, and then on to Japan to meet our distributor and figure out our relationship more there, and then on to Korea to integrate a wholly owned subsidiary that we now own and figure out how we were going to integrate that. And I'm bringing that up because I think something that's really important when you do international work is you have to be really open-minded and really non-judgmental and just kind of go in and do things. So here I was doing a lot of transactional work, which I wasn't used to, but at the same time I was having to work with a lot of different people and be very open and learn as much as I could about their culture and learn as many phrases as I could, which really, really helped, because I think the cultural aspect is as important as the legal aspect. And from there, I spent the next 10 years at Clorox working on a whole variety of things, from mergers and acquisitions to distribution agreements to supporting, and I supported businesses in the Middle East, in Mexico, in Canada, deals in India. You just have to be really, really open and accepting. And anyway, so that was my experience. I think I figured out I went to a couple dozen countries total. But a lot of the legal work was very similar. So once you start kind of doing the different kinds of transactions, whatever you find out is, you know, the legal work you're doing, a lot of it is the same, but it's a big piece of it is learning the culture and being open and learning how people negotiate different things and how you can best form a relationship with people, especially if you're doing a joint venture or a merger or what have you. So that's my story.
Hi, my name is Ian Johnson. I'm in the International Arbitration Group at Warwick, Harrington, and Sutcliffe, right here in the city. I'll sort of follow Dean's model. I'll tell you how I got into an international practice and then suggest some ways that you might consider trying to do the same. I need to go onto my BlackBerry because I sent myself an email with my notes. And there we are. So I came out of law school in 2000. I started in complex commercial litigation. I'm a litigator at bottom. Did that for about 5 years. I became interested in international practice, specifically international arbitration, when I was watching a CLE program. I had to do something. I needed like 4 hours of CLE. There was a big panel discussion on international arbitration, so I turned that on and started to do some work and some emails. After about a half hour, I found it pretty interesting, so I started to listen. And about 3.5 hours later, I was sold. I said, that's for me. So I started to feel around the firm at Warwick. I was at Warwick. Sent some emails and got in touch with somebody in the Paris office, an old timer by the name of Laurie Craig. And he's been in international arbitration for about 50 years, been in Paris for almost 50 years. And we started a relationship. He sent me some work. I did a couple of treaty arbitrations. I don't know if any of you have taken international arbitration, but bilateral investment treaty arbitrations, which are fascinating. Then about 5 years ago, I moved to Europe, moved to the German offices, then to Paris, and then to London. So I was there for about 4 years. I came back about a year ago, and now my mix is about 40% state and federal litigation, and about 60% international arbitration, most of it centered in Germany. So it's been a pretty good deal. I've got to travel around a lot, got to travel Eastern Europe. And you know, you travel kind of in style. It's really not too bad. The client's paying for it, you stay in nice hotels, you fly business class. It's really a pretty sweet deal. So how do you get that kind of life? Well, I can only talk about international arbitration. I don't know much about transactional work. I don't build things, I destroy them. And I think that, in that regard, I'm different from most people. So I can only tell you what the international arbitration community is like. It's pretty small, but it's growing. And there are ways to insinuate yourself into that community. Let me suggest some. Not to put the password. This is where we get to the meat of the matter. So the first thing I would suggest is really learn something about international arbitration. When I saw that CLE, I didn't just say, well, that sounds interesting and that's good enough. No, I started to read the primers, Redford and Hunter, which is sort of a core text of international arbitration. Then I started to read the arbitral awards. I went out to more sophisticated secondary sources. I started to read the journals. I did not put myself out there until I felt I knew something about the practice area. You have an opportunity here in school. I don't know how many of you are still 2Ls or what have you, but take the international courses, take international arbitration. That's your interest. I mean, one of the most interesting things about the practice area is that it really does straddle the divide between academia and practice. But that means that you have to be something of an academic. I mean, make no mistake, it's a great part of that practice, but that means things are expected. You're expected to know the publications, and frankly, you're expected to publish. I like that, but it does mean that's something you should be looking to do, and sooner rather than later. There's no reason why you shouldn't be trying to get shorter things published now. It doesn't need to be a law review article. Several of us are members of the California State Bar International Law section. They're desperate for material all the time. 2, 3 pages. Submit it. It doesn't have to be the next great thing. Read a case, read an arbitral award that's of interest that just came out. Summarize it, for that matter, and submit it. It doesn't have to be great legal thing. But you are expected to publish and to know what's out there. And you're expected to be able to carry on a discourse at a fairly high level. Which again is great, but it's something that's expected. Reach out, Dean mentioned this. Make contact wherever you can. Look to meet people on vacation, join organizations. You're all free members of the California State Bar International Law section. Check out the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. I believe they also have a student membership program. If you have the wherewithal and can swing it, try to go to the Hague Academy. I mean, two spouts. It's a fantastic program. To say it's well respected is to damn with faint praise. I mean, that's quite a program, and it has a reputation throughout Europe. It's hard. It's almost unrivaled. Participate. How many of you are participating in Viz Moot? Do it. It's a lot of fun. You meet not only students from around the world, but you meet potential employers, frankly. It's something that practitioners love to attend because it's fun. I think the arbitrators have more fun than the students do. We do have a lot of fun. I think we party harder. It's still a run. But it's a lot of fun. And you will meet people from the big law firm, the people who have the job. So consider the Viz Moot. Now, LLM, I think this was sort of an issue that had been sort of raised in the, okay, I took an LLM, but I did it at the London School of Economics. Mostly for fun. I told my firm I was a little tired, I wanted a little time off, so I decided to go over it. As it turned out, I billed more hours that year than I had in 2 years previous, but so I worked very hard that year. What did I get out of it? Did I learn anything? I don't know. But I sure met an awful lot of people, and it was a lot of fun, and those people are still my friends. This was 4 years ago. We're in constant contact. They're all over the world. If you get into a program, I'm sure LSE isn't unique in that regard, but I mean, those folks were from everywhere. And now I have friends everywhere. So on balance, I would say there might be something to it. Is it going to greatly increase your employability? I would say it really depends on where you go. If you could do a postgrad program in France, in French, in Spain, in Spanish, in Russian, in Moscow, in Russian, now you're getting somewhere. I think that would be something perhaps worthwhile, and I think something an employer would be very interested in seeing. Which raises another point: foreign languages. If you have a foreign, if you speak two, I can't speak one. If you have fluency in 2 languages, I mean near native fluency or native fluency in 2 languages, you have a real leg up. Particularly if that other language happens to be Spanish or Russian, at least in my field. Those are two, of course, and then Cantonese and Mandarin too are on the rise. But if you have those language skills, apply them. If you don't, really consider trying to learn another language. And again, Spanish and Russian seem like likely suspects. And here, Spanish is, relatively speaking, easier to learn in the Bay Area than it would be in a lot of other places. All right, we're circling the bend here, but I know I have 2 other things to say. Find a mentor. This has to do with reaching out. If at all possible, browbeat somebody established in an established firm to become your friend and mentor and guide. I was lucky. I have to say, I was very lucky. I formed a close friendship with somebody who really knows the business. But you'd be surprised. People like mentoring. You know, people like to help them. And I have found, by and large, that the folks in the international arbitration community are a pretty friendly bunch and a pretty giving bunch. You know, of course, there are exceptions, but that has been more or less my experience. Really think about that. be patient and be flexible. This is competitive. Because you stay in nice hotels and because you fly around the world, it is competitive. So you have to be patient. Do the things I said, and I tend to think it will come. On the other hand, you also have to, you can't wait forever. And if something looks promising, like it might be the first step towards something else, you really do need to take it. You have to be willing to travel, at the drop of a hat. So be patient and flexible. And then the final thing is you have to be lucky, and that's the truth. But to some extent, you do make your own luck, and I'm hoping that if you do some of the things I've suggested, maybe some luck will come your way. There you go.
Well, thank you. Helen, you know, who was scheduled to be on this program, does immigration law, and that's another area that, since it hasn't come up, I thought I would mention. She sent an email earlier saying one of her clients was arrested and she had to stand by, so she may be doing criminal law as part of that, because that is an area where, you know, we deal with moving money across the borders, moving companies and moving people across the borders, and licensing, moving ideas and intellectual property across the borders. And, you know, one of those aspects is people, where it's been an area where the individuals can have small practices representing individuals, grow that to be representing companies, and then build a practice that way. And that's another area of international law where we get involved. So we've had kind of a general background about our own experiences, which are eclectic, and an example of that was with some hints and some luck and some being in the right places. I think it's an opportunity. They do have an LLM in international law here, and somehow there's also LLMs in substantive areas. I have one in intellectual property, which I don't think has ever done me any good at all, other than the fact that I was at George Washington in Washington and was able to learn a lot of intellectual property in that area and make some pretty good connections. But that is one opportunity. We may have some LLM candidates in the room. I don't know that because I know, at the schools I don't have that good. So you may have some experience on that and see that as a networking and opportunity, and maybe give us the benefit of your experience on that, because that's another kind of opportunity to make some connections and learn some law. So at this point, I think we've said some things on our own. I guess I'd like to give the opportunity for a few questions that you may have in the context of that, in general, how we can help you out. Not necessarily specific targeted, but more general, be able to help others, or your own experiences where you had some connections or some opportunities. Share that.
Thank you. Several of you talked about networking, which I've only found my internships so far through networking, nothing else. But how do you do it on an international scale? Like if I want to go back and work in Japan, how do I network from here? How do I meet those people?
I mean, I can say something about that. I mean, there are so many organizations that encourage business between countries. Personally, with the German background, I'm not so familiar with the Japanese aspect, but there are at least half a dozen to a dozen organizations in the Bay Area alone that somehow encourage business across the Atlantic. So there's the German-American Business Association, there German-American Chamber of Commerce, and these exist for all countries out there, at least the industrial nations. And they offer events all the time. They offer event calendars. You can sometimes have great speeches or other presentations that are really worth visiting, not only for the substantive information that is portrayed there, but also the people you meet. And they typically schedule half an hour before and an hour after just for networking. So it's really the purpose is to get to know people in the field that have similar interests and so on, and those are great sources.
I would say that I found the same thing. Being in San Francisco, we're really lucky. Many countries have their own sort of chamber of commerce type entity here. It's, I mean, it's usually a consulate type situation. May not be an embassy, but it's a consulate, but part of that is sort of this furthering business with America and having it go both ways. They have lots of events. So I would just put in Japan, find the consulate, ask them if they've got some kind of business organization and what kinds of events they have going on.
Every year there are so many alumni from Asian countries and worldwide, so they are pretty high prestigious legal professions in their countries, so you can maximize the opportunity to meet them and ask them about their cultures and legal markets so that they can help you.
And most of the schools in the Bay Areas have one or two international law programs, all-day programs, or lectures, not necessarily a career program, but substantive program where you get the opportunity to go to and attend those programs as well. And law students are invited to attend those, encouraged to attend that, and maybe at a different law school that they're attending, but there are certainly some opportunities to do that. The other thing, just to mention, it was mentioned about writing articles. The International Law Section State Bar has a writing competition where you can write an article as a law student. You can actually get it published in our journal. We'll make sure that gets taken care of and get a nice check as a result of that. So there's some opportunities like that. And there are a lot of those opportunities, and even I do intellectual property in the copyright area. For 50 years, there's been a Nathan Birkin copyright article competition where it's a national, international writing competition in law students. They give a lot of awards, even in local areas and schools and various things. And you can write on an international topic dealing with copyright, which often comes up, trying to protect copyrights around the world on the internet, which is another question. So,
I would just add that, of course, the best networking is face-to-face, but this is the internet age, so, I mean, you could go online, and there's the Roppongi Bar Association, there's the Daiichi Bar Association. You can reach out to people, you can have phone calls, you can email, show your interest, and don't forget the cardinal rules of networking. Know your story. Talked about being a salesperson before, Jessica, but know your story. Let your passion come through. So, always ask if they can introduce you to one more person, so that you're always expanding that networking pool. That's the second cardinal rule. And then finally, always loop back to them. So you can tell them, by the way, you contacted so and so. You can keep. Is it okay if I let you know in a few months how things are coming with my search, or how I'm developing this idea, whatever it is. And so that way you really, I had a student that was looking for, a recent graduate that was looking for a job, and he, has constantly checked in with me, and it just so happened that he hit me on a day that another lawyer from another law firm mentioned they were looking for someone, so it was his lucky day. So I mean, apply those rules. Face-to-face networking is the best, but don't be afraid to get online.
Yeah, you can target that in blogs. Or I happen to do a case involving cross-border protection of intellectual property, being able to get an injunction against somebody in Mexico who was selling counterfeit shoes solely in Mexico, not in the United States. And then I had a couple of people who were law students at the time sort of picked that up and did a case note on it at various schools, or wrote an article on it, and I kind of helped them out that way, and they became mentees to some extent, sort of followed their career through that. So if you see something like that happening, take the opportunity to maybe pick out somebody who just had a case or had a decision or something that is interesting, and maybe you can write a note or an article or do something about that, and get in that way if it's in a targeted area where you'd like to practice. Yes.
For summer internships, if you're looking to go into international law, would it be more beneficial to go overseas if you have the opportunity to work at a small law firm there, or work at a law firm here that's slightly bigger or more well-known? But what would be kind of, and maybe that the focus is not so much international law, what would be more beneficial in that sort of sense?
Well, I've dealt with both, especially in Europe. So if this is your target area, very much depends on the personal relationships you can build, and whether this is really, whether you want to use the summer internship as just a piece of life experience, and then maybe take a few contacts with it, or whether you have a strong focus on something that you really want to do, and have the opportunity of interning in that particular area. So I think if you have a strong focus already, really try to find a law office that deals particularly with these things, your field of interest. Whether it's big or small, it doesn't really matter unless you really have a focus. If you want to work with a big law firm, I think you should also intern in a big law firm, because you get to know the mechanics and a little bit of the atmosphere in such an office. Small offices can be more beneficial in some way. They are often more focused, have the same cases over and over, since they're only focused on that particular area. So you're not so much bumped around in multiple fields, but you focus on one particular field oftentimes in small offices. So it depends a little bit on, and that's a typical attorney's answer. It depends.
Well, just sort of echoing something you said, yes. The intern system in Europe is very, very different from the intern system in the United States. A referendar in an office in Germany or a stagiaire in an office in Paris is not on an extended job interview. That's just one stage they're going to be doing, or one stint as a referendar. I mean, yes, they're trying to build a relationship with that firm, perhaps, but there's no suggestion necessarily those people are going to be working at that firm in the long term. In the U.S., however, if you go to a big firm for a summer, that's your job interview for a job. So if what you're talking about is a summer associateship as opposed to spending a summer abroad, I would tend to say take a summer associateship with a big law from the U.S. Do you see what I mean? It's just they're doing two different things in summer internships, Europeans as opposed to Americans.
And that question may turn a little bit on, 1L versus 2L.
Yeah, and the nature of the internship here, exactly.
And the other thing is, there's people don't stay in the same place, and your experience with the big law firm or with the small law firm may be to learn that's what you don't want to do. So you have to do that. So, somehow you have to be prescient as to what you may want to end up doing at some point, and what's the best way to get there. And sometimes it's circuitous in that sense. So part of it is building experience, and part of it is probably resume building to some extent, because a lot of companies feel that you should have had the big law firm experience. They don't necessarily want to pay the big law firm to do it. They may want to hire you in-house to do it, but they feel you should have that background and have that experience. So the expectations are different in terms of mobility today, which has really changed so much. And I think in the United States we have a lot more mobility, although I think that's changing in Europe much more so now too, probably because of the American or U.S. influence of that, the mobility of people. They aren't wed into the companies or their employers as they were in the past. Yes?
I'm an LLM student here at Golden Gate University, and in terms of networking, in terms of learning, it's really great. But then I'm just wondering, what is the real value of this LLM? Basically, I'm going to graduate in May, and I was just wondering how it is seen by the employers when you have an LLM. Is it really a plus, or is it just?
Well, the value of the LLM is an interesting debate. If you follow some of the law articles recently, there's been I guess, canvassing of companies and firms, or maybe more firm focused, as to whether an LLM helps people out or not. And I think there were some people that were saying no, they figure maybe people can't make up their mind what they want to do, and they're spending too much time in school or their academics or whatever. But I think part of it is just kind of the timing. Some people are doing that because they couldn't get a job and they'd rather specialize in a certain area or get some additional skills, or stay in school, stay in the same place, and wait out the economy. I don't think it's really, from the standpoint of at least intellectual property, I don't think it really matters a whole lot in the US market, but I think in the international market, they find those important, particularly if you go to a different area where you from where your LLM may be. But that's, you know, my view and some of the press. Others may have different feelings about that.
Where did you go to law school?
In France, Paris.
Okay, so this is a totally different dynamic. I mean, you have to look at, if you're taking LLM in a different place, that's a totally different kettle of fish from going to law school here in the U.S. and taking a tax LLM. It's a totally different. So your question is, as a French lawyer coming in and getting an LLM, you want to take the bar exam, right? California bar exam. Are you going to be employable in California?
Exactly.
Okay. Right. I think you were, Neil, I think you were addressing more the U.S. law student going to take a U.S. LLM, and their question. Well, it's tough. I mean, it's tough out there for LLMs. Doesn't matter where the LLM program is, because you don't have the benefit of spending a 1L summer, a 2L summer, what have you, at a law firm. So it is tough for the LLM, but not impossible. We certainly have hired LLM. Okay, so what do you have? What do you have to offer that the people who went to law school here don't? You speak French, for one thing, which is pretty good. I don't know what your grades were like in law school. You don't have to tell me, but that would be good, because you know it's more important for that for a French law firm. What did you have any additional substantive areas that you studied in French? Play to your strengths. Do you know something? Do you have a substantive area of the law that you know? Play to those strengths. There's a lot of international dispute resolution going on right now in the French language. Play to it. Law firms need French speakers. Use it. You do have some things going for it. But I think, again, you just have to get out there and let people know you're around, for sure. Have you started to send out resumes? What have you?
No, not yet. And
Folks?
what I have, to answer your question, what I have is also a knowledge of African law, for example, but I was wondering, is that too specific?
That's good. That's very good. That's very good. Because, no, there's a lot of inward investment in Africa now. It's just now starting to see real international dispute resolution centered in Africa. Not seated in Africa, but centered on Africa, which is exciting. Target the international law firms. Make sure they know what you bring to the table. That's extraordinary. And of course, target international law firms like Auric that have an office in Paris and are doing business in Africa. Or have clients in Africa. I don't know. It seems, you know, I've heard much worse stories than yours. So.
I just wanted to make a couple of an announcement. Since we're talking about networking and LLM degrees, I'm part of the graduate law program's office here at Golden Gate, and I think all of you know, or most of you, that we do offer an LLM in international law. And if you're a JD student here, you can transfer 9 credits from your JD program to complete the 24 credits. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is on Friday, April 6th, we'll be having our Fulbright Symposium, which we have every year. And so far we have at least 5 Fulbright scholars coming to speak. And there'll be many leaders in the field of international law as well as consulates at that event. So all students are welcome to attend, and it's a great networking opportunity.
Sure. So a lot of you have talked about spending a term, 3 years, 5 years abroad. I'm wondering if you might have any advice about points of entry if you want to have a more permanent move abroad. My focus is European law and eventually my trade proposals.
Yeah, I mean, I think it came up in the context of something here, that in large part you have to have your bag packed. And to some extent, international law involves some flexibility in being available to travel, which may not be for everybody, and it may be for a lot of people. You're talking more in terms of targeting ultimately living abroad and working abroad. So,
I don't know if Ian or Jessica will agree, but I think the same principles that apply to trying to get that overseas job apply to trying to get a more permanent job. Really, in my experience, the positions that I've had and then others that I know have had, really it's up to you how long you want to stay. I mean, we're Americans, and California is, you know, the most beautiful place on the planet. So we do tend to come back home, but I think in my case, had I chosen to stay in Asia forever, I think that would have been okay. A question that we commonly hear from law students and young lawyers is, I want to go abroad, but I don't, I want to think about a longer term career where I may not want to live overseas. So I think if you're able to make the transition and you want to stay long term, depending on the position, you may very much have the opportunity.
I very much agree. I mean, once you're there, you can basically say you have established your network, you have a job, you can take it from there. And I think it's more a question how long are they keeping you there against your will, basically. It typically, once you're there and once you establish it 4 to 6 months, a year, then it's up to you oftentimes to, they will most often give you some kind of offer or other opportunities that you can take.
Yeah, even in my case, I came from Korea and I went to study education. So in some senses, it's very a risky choice for me. Because when I go back to Korea, it's very, it's highly possible to find teaching position there, and because I already got my LLM JSD from the United States and I can directly just teach. But it's up to you. You are choosing this your life. So I'd say there must be people that you have to just give up. But I believe there is something relevant you do countries or
So you want to be in Brussels. You want to do some sort of EU law. That's easy because fortunately there are all kinds of very low-paying jobs. I mean, there is some truth to that. That's how folks start out. But I'm talking sharing apartments, low-paying. Pretty dismal conditions. But what the heck? But that is true. I don't hear an accent, so I'm assuming you're a U.S. citizen. You don't have to tell me which you are. That's a problem, of course, because obviously there would be all kinds of positions with the commission or what have you that you can get that aren't available to you. Still, there's so much stuff in the periphery there that everything from helping publish one of the dozens and dozens of secondary sources about what's going on at the commission to there are dozens and dozens of jobs paying between 20,000 and 30,000 euros a year that you can get if you want to be in Brussels and earn money you want. So I don't think that would be much of a problem. I don't know, and then you start to get to know people there in that community. So, yeah.
Well, but there are also higher paying jobs out there.
Oh, sure. That's your sole criteria. You're okay. Yeah.
We'll take one more question. I think we have to get up around for another 5.
I'll be quick then. I'm just wondering, so if you are interested in global equity, is it more beneficial to get, well, with keeping in mind eventually practicing on an international context, is it more beneficial to get general international law experience or like specialize first in like private equity, VC mergers and acquisitions?
I think people are looking for do you have the skills? And so they're not looking at, have you done international work? They want to see, have you done private equity work? Have you done this kind of work? From there, it's going to expand to international. I don't know if other people disagree. I mean, it's like, they want to see that you know something about the work you're doing.
Yeah, no, I would just say, I mean, obviously it's fact specific. Go with the opportunity where you think you can grow the most. I think, there are, I'll speak for our field, if we're looking for candidates, sure, we love people that have substantive knowledge. Sometimes it's not international at all. Sometimes they have less substantive knowledge, but they have an international focus that really appeals to us. So I don't think there's one right way, but, as you make your own luck and opportunities are developing, talk to people and then make your judgment call about where you really think you can grow. Because if you grow, and develop those interests and skills, then it comes through and you get closer to your goal.
Yeah, I think we're at the end of our time, and I don't know how long we have the room for, but we'll try to stay around for a few minutes and maybe take questions. There are some giveaways here. There is a sign-up list. Please sign up. Give us an email address. We get membership with the International Law Section State Bar. You get a few emails. You